and welcome back to Sean's Thoughts. This is my third episode today, and I haven't even reached lunchtime. You see, I've been getting a lot of messages, and when I say getting messages, I mean messages through synchronicity, through little things that people say that suddenly connect two pieces of information that I had previously understood or detected, and little things that people act the way they act or the way they say things or things that are unsaid sometimes. And I put all of those little pieces together. And sometimes, even when I talk and have this amazing flow of wisdom and insights into the life that I live and those who are around me, I sometimes even come across, like, for instance, in these last two podcasts that I did this morning, not only do they help other people, means that if someone stumbles across it and listens to it and they may hear something that connects insights to them, it also helps me examine and, you know, potentially realize the truth that has been within my own reality. You see, one of the things that I was doing prior to this whole podcast that I've created now is that before my Candid Talks podcast, which was a podcast that I had done quite a while ago, I was recording audios as I walked through the forest, and I would essentially speak out into the universe, into the world, into reality, to God, to my higher selves. I was going through a lot of different, discoveries and research and such. And I would record these audios of essentially questioning myself. Was what I was learning or was what I was discovering, was it to be true? And I've went through many different scenarios and thought games and thought patterns and experiments with myself. I remember doing this with the Judy Byenting report. I found that the Judy Byenting report was a constant repetition of the same thing. And now that I understand AI, for all we know, AI could have actually been the one who is the speaker of that report. And I understood and came to understand propaganda and how, you know, if you want someone to believe what you have to say, well, then maybe you go out and you find eight other people and you get them to create a channel where they're repeating what you said and then it redirects it back to you. So, anyways, I had an awful lot of opportunities of working through my own discoveries and my own essentially awakening based on just recording these podcasts. And prior, I was concerned what people would think. I was worried about how it would be viewed. I essentially was struggling with my own self-confidence, yet now I see a lot more and I feel and hear a lot more, and a lot more things are coming to the surface in the headlines and such. And that's what truly does lead me to what I want to share, this beautiful scene that I'm staring out the window looking at right now. I Yeah, it's a remarkable frame that I'm capturing right now in this beautiful rain. And yeah, so thank you so much for sharing with me. Once again, I'm seeing people come and go because, they might click on what they're directed by God to click on. People haven't yet fully recognized that sometimes these coincidences that happen in our lives aren't necessarily coincidences, that they're actually redirections from many different potential powers that are trying to essentially help us. It reminds me of that story that I'll share it with you right now. There's this story of this priest, and he was on top of his church, and the whole area around it was a rushing river because he was in the middle of a flood, and he's up there on the steeple tower holding the cross, and um, he's sitting there asking for God to come and help him, and please God, I don't want to be lost in a flood. And then this boat comes by, a little canoe, and it's pretty full, and they say, "Hey, priest, do you want to get on our boat and we'll help you?" And he's like, "No, no, no, I'm waiting for God. God, please, God's gonna come save me. Please, God, come save me." And anyway, so the canoe goes on, and a little while later, another boat comes up, and This time it's a speedboat, and, they would get there faster, and they have lots of room, and, they drive by, and they're like, "Hey, priest, do you need some you need some help?" He's like, "No, no, no, God's gonna come protect me. I'm sitting here, and I'm praying, and I'm holding on to this crucifixion cross on the top of the building." They're like, "Oh, well, the water's rising." He's like, "Oh, no, but don't worry, God's gonna come get me." And then, they take off, and, the water's getting pretty high up, and, he's kicking at the actual waves of the water that's still flooding, which is, kind of cool to what's happening right now. It's love rain and such. Anyways, a helicopter comes by, and, they call out the side of the helicopter like, "Hey, priest, the water's right there. There might even be sharks in the water by now." And the guy's like, "No, no, no, God's gonna come get me. I know it. I'm doing all the right things." And anyways, the story goes is that the priest dies, and, that's unfortunate and all, but he stood there stuck within his beliefs, and he ends up getting to the end, to meet God in the story anyways, and he says, "God, why didn't you come and save me?" And God's like, "What are you talking about, dude? I literally sent you a canoe. I sent you a speedboat. Then I sent you a helicopter, and still you refuse to take my help." See, that's a wonderful story about how we sometimes have, or we're so focused on what we believe is going to happen, or what we're praying to happen, yet we ignore everything that happens around us. And so I often see videos come into my recommendation feed that are essentially giving me oftentimes these great insights. It's as if through discernment, if I'm able to listen to even an hour podcast or half an hour, I really like it when Carrie Kay, when she makes her podcasts like for a longer duration, I really feel that I'm getting more rather than just, it's like a movie. You sit down, and, there's a little bit of time to get into the listening, or into the essentially the active listening. But anyways, a lot of times these videos will enter into my feed, and they'll hold or and contain some amazing knowledge. And it's not just those people that are saying it. Sometimes those people are even, and me, myself, and I, guided to actually say what we say. And often we don't know if fully, or even have a clue sometimes of why we're saying what we're saying. Once upon a time, I remember walking into a restaurant, a pizza franchise, and suddenly I started talking to the guy that was behind the counter about several different things. And I'm sitting there to myself wondering, why am I talking about this stuff? And then I discover that it's pertinent to him because he was the owner of the restaurant. And this had to do with, things to do with ownership, and, his own personal life and the changes within his life. And suddenly, upon actually having a discussion with him, I realized the things that I had said unintentionally had great impact in that moment of time for him. And it was just simply about trusting the process, trusting what came into my life and what came into his life. And that synchronicity was not just a coincidence. It was not an accident that all those things happened. It was a divine timing. And even with the passing of my cat, I don't know if you listened to that recently. My beloved cat, Xiao, she passed away after 18 years of guardianship that she had essentially devoted her life to protecting my family and I from a numerous amount of, unseen psychic stuff and other stuff as well. Of course, the mice that came into the house, she dealt with them and more so scared them away because she was like Bloodfield and would prefer to eat and sleep as opposed to, hurt mice. But nonetheless, on the night of that, I was listening or watching with my son a Pokemon episode. Now, we were just watching not a random season episode. We were watching the next episode within the season we were watching. There's actually, if you're a fan of Pokemon, there's a site called Pokeflix. And perhaps if I remember, I will post the link in the video right now when I actually do all the metadata stuff. But anyways, there's a site called Pokeflix where they showcase all of the Pokemon episodes. And anyways, my son and I were watching one of the seasons, and on the night that my cat passed, the episode that we watched was an episode where Litten, which by the way is a cat Pokemon, had to go through the loss of its friend, which was Snoutland, and it was a dog Pokemon. And it was Ash, which was the main character, learning about the passing of a Pokemon. See, because Pokemon, although they get into these glorious battles with fire and flames and electricity and such, that they still have a time when they let go. And that's essentially the synchronicity that came into my life. And in the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is being highlighted right now, that the synchronicity of this is coming in. And yet, as I sat there and absorbed the lessons that Ash and Lytton were going through with the passing of their beloved animal, I could also feel that, of course, it was relating to my son. It was relating to me. It was essentially an example of synchronicity and God coming in to help and assist with this passing. See, for me, my cat wasn't just an animal, it wasn't just a pet. I saw it as a sovereign being. I talked to it often as if it was able to fully listen to me. And although at times she was a little belligerent and ignoring of me and selfish, even at times with give me my food, meow, meow, she was a companion. She was a being. And I understand that we as souls, we can incarnate into a lot more than just a Homo sapiens body. And I saw my cat as something far more than that. And so this video that came into my life, although it was the next episode of Pokemon for me to watch, it was an episode that related directly to the traumas and the issues that I was going through. So back to that priest on the steeple top going through a flood. There's things that came into their life, and yet they were stuck on the belief that they would be saved the way that they thought they were going to be saved, that perhaps, a hand would come out of the sky by the Almighty himself and pluck them up and take them away. And yet, there were different ways that this saving could happen. And quite often, I'll see it as when we receive videos or information of stuff coming into our feed, sometimes that person who created it was prompted to do that, to say what they had to say. See, often when I create these videos, I have no real clue of what I'm going to talk about. Sometimes I think I'm going to talk about one thing and then I go off and I start talking about another thing, but I recognize that what I'm saying is relevant to someone, even if I see no one on the stream. It could be a person a year from now. It could be a year ago that this affected someone. It could be just that it's for me in order for me to walk and talk through my own personal thoughts so that I can have a better understanding of the world that I'm in. And so there's many different reasons why things are happening the way that they are happening. See, often I belong with this group, and often they're getting infuriated by things not happening fast enough and, events going on in other parts of the world. And people are perceiving that as, well, someone's not doing what they're supposed to be doing because we're not where we're supposed to be. And yet, with every challenge and every struggle that each individual is going through across the planet right now, everyone's being forged into something far greater than they could have ever imagined they were being, because we are saying goodbye to a system of control that most of us never even fully understood what was happening. Even those people, those families that were involved, or those Homo sapiens that had been converted over to we'll call it the dark side. Many people didn't even know the full extent to the manipulation and the control that was ongoing from the Hollywood movies projecting what they wanted to project. Like, it was no greater scene as the 2012 movie that came in out in 2012. Well, they're telling us that that whole Mayan calendar thing's a conspiracy theory. They're making a movie about the end of the world in 2012, projecting the idea that that's what essentially they would have preferred, some sort of giant flood in order to wipe out the population, because then they could bring on their global reset and run in on their new horses, their stallions, and say, hey, I saved the world. But yet that reality is no longer happening. There are many positive forces that have essentially exposed the false light, the false beings who pretended to be gods, who pretended to be pretended to be human, which in this case I mean Homo sapien, and they pretended to be things that they weren't, beings they weren't, light that they weren't. They hid behind organizations created in order to hide who they truly were. And now we are saying goodbye. Hello, Sonia. And well, you said bye right after that. So hello and bye. Thank you for sharing with me. Yes, Area 51. Actually, there is an Area 52 as well. And on top of that, there is a complete underground world that we're unaware of that's interconnected by different trains. And if you want to actually see an example of that visually, then I recommend that you go. I'm seeing that my microphone perhaps might not be connecting. Let me see. I apologize for the delay. I'm seeing a little flashing light that the microphone isn't even connecting, so I wonder whether or not people can hear me. If you can hear me, I would greatly appreciate if someone like puts in some sort of emoji. I know there's two people on right now. Anyways, so back to what I was saying, there's a whole underground reality that most people are unaware. And this is showcased in the movie, I think it was one of the Godzilla movies, where the characters, they essentially take an underground railway, it's a maglev train, and they take it from one place of the world to another place of the world. From my understanding, there is a reality outside. Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that. It's funny enough, I get so many different technical difficulties. My phone, which was perfectly dried, was trying to tell me that there was water on the adapter before I started this, and I'm sitting in a warm car and there's no water, and it's then it gives me the option to essentially ignore the emergency indicator. Thank you again. Um, and continue podcasting. And right now it's telling me that there's no audio. The lights are flashing. And if you can hear me, I appreciate that you let me know that. And so back to what I was saying is there's an awful lot of reality outside of our reality. And yet many of these things we're saying goodbye to. And that's why I called this podcast Goodbye to the Deep State and to all their controllers, because they had a whole system that was set up essentially to essentially farm us as Homo sapiens, to farm our energy, to farm our productivity, and to essentially farm our energy for their own purposes. Now, there's many different possible explanations or reasons to why and who was part of that whole control system. Yet the actual glowing headline that I would say and requires underlining and neon lights perhaps would be that these powers no longer have their power that they had over us. They no longer have their magic wands to create illusions. They no longer have their great immensity of AIs that could do all the work for them. They themselves have experienced their own quickening, as Kim said, and have passed on, have returned back to source. People like, or beings like Archangel Michael, as a being of false light. And I know that's going to rub people some ways wrong, but whoever was pretending to be that being, you could even say, went back to source. And these being handlers of different groups and such, they are no longer connecting those people to those technologies that were used to control us, that were used to manipulate us. It's becoming very self-evident right now in Hollywood, for example. When I watch all of these, we'll call them new movies, which I don't necessarily believe they were even really new. I've seen the power of AI and utilizing AI and creating my own images and videos. And while they show mistakes in photographs and, hands are have six fingers and all that stuff, I really think that that's just getting us to believe that they don't have the ability, because when I started telling AI one sentences to create these YouTube shorts, and they were coming out with amazing recreations and full overlays of the areas that I was living on, based no, not living on, but video filming on, that they would create these amazing videos that they have had for such a long time, the ability to recreate our reality, and we wouldn't even know it. Means the idea of deep fakes, or that concert where Michael Jackson was on stage as a hologram after he passed away, and most people couldn't even see or know it wasn't Michael. Now, of course, there is the possibility that it was actually a overlay or a hard being that they were pretending to be. Maybe someone wanted to pretend to be Michael Jackson, and so they jumped in one of his avatars or whatever it is. There's lots of conspiracy theories, as we'll call it. But nonetheless, the point of the story of that I'm putting out is we were told it was a hologram, and many people couldn't even distinguish between it being a hologram. And he created a new song, supposedly, and he interacted, and I say he, I mean the avatar that bounced across the stage amongst other artists and did his dancing. You know, he engaged with the audience. So a lot of the world that we thought we knew, based on the news broadcasts that we were presented, based on the movies that we were programmed by, getting us to believe that these different, we'll call them secret police, were there perhaps to protect us, when in fact we lived in a world where there was a lot more, I don't even know what the word is, but there was a lot more story that we were believing was true. Even the Cold War of the 1960s with the Soviet, I've come to understand that they were still working together. It's just we are sold an illusion, a reason why prices have to go up, or reason why we need to pay more, or a reason why we need to pay taxes, or why we need to pay more taxes. Or right now, we're sold an illusion of why does gas have to be more expensive. We're basically given the reasons, and therefore by complying we're presenting our permission for that to exist. And it's back to the another story of the frogs in the water. See, when you as a chef, and I won't much call it much of a chef, but if a person was wanting to cook frogs, see, frogs can jump out of water because of the way they're designed. And so they found that if you take frogs and you put them in a hot boiling water, that they'll just jump out. And if you're trying to cook the frog for some stupid strange reason from it being alive, then you're going to put the frogs in the big pot of water at a nice temperature that the frogs will like, and they'll swim around and they'll be all happy. And then you'll slowly increase the temperature of the water. And the water, as they start to adjust to the temperature of the water, they'll stay in it. And it won't be until it's too late that the water becomes boiling and the frogs are boiled. And that seems to be an awful, horrible way to, treat anything. And yet that's how we as Homo sapiens have lived for such a long time. They've basically pushed us forward in the direction that they wanted, added this fee, added this administration charge, added this interest charge, increased this, added this to the bill, added a new tax to hydro. Like, there's just so many different little scams that are added to everything that we do, and there's justifications, but it's very similar to those frogs who got boiled in the water. And yet there comes a time where a frog figures, hey, the water is getting a little hotter. Oh, hey, wait a minute, maybe I'll jump out now. And that's what's been happening since 2012, is more frogs started recognizing that they were in a boiling pot of water. And that's seen nowhere more than their little crap 2019 operation where they were essentially doing what they were doing, and more people in groups like Action for Canada or the Canadian Federation Coalition, even if they housed operatives and people within those groups, I was able to firsthand see that more people were willing to say no. And my first meeting with Action for Canada was kind of like a movie in that we met during the night. Everything was in a lockdown. You know, we weren't allowed to go and do anything. We were told, you know, don't get into 6 feet within anyone. And yet there was a group of us, and I mean like 30 or 40 people, that we got together in a barn on my friend's farmland. And we essentially had a conversation and we united. And well, nothing ever truly really came from that in the sense of that night. It did give a lot of people hope and belief and, you know, the knowledge that we were more people aware. And then what eventually thrived from that night was the Action for Canada. It was a group of people that were suddenly saying no to a lot of the things that were happening. And that was the end of them, the end of their control, the end of their repetitive cycles, their fake medicines that came forth telling us that they were solutions by a problem that they caused. And yet, in the end, we recognize that the solution that they proposed actually caused a lot more harm than it did. And while there has been major efforts to essentially keep people like me quiet or anyone else from sharing truth, other organizations such as the United News Network, hosted by Sunny Galt and Calum, they came out and they started releasing real news. So if you're actually looking for real news of what's happening in the world, definitely go over and visit that site. Sunny did a great expose on the actual situation with oil and gas down in America. Well, America is saying, you know, like that we're having a shortage. We had field messengers, and I say we because I'm with that community. We had field messengers reporting on the truth that the refineries in America were closed down and the workers weren't even working. And yet there is large amounts of crude oil and stuff that they could be creating new gas with. But from my understanding, in order to affect the price of gas, there has to be a story of scarce and lack and scarcity. And then that story, hosted essentially by your major news networks, which are owned by other conglomerates such as Disney, they get us into a state where we justify to ourselves why we are willing to pay more. Gas goes up and down. How does gas go up and down in 20 cents between one day and the other day? Well, go back and listen to my podcast where I exposed all of the knowledge that I learned throughout the last 10 years about where the money that we pay for gas goes. So perhaps I'll click that or link that when I publish this video fully. And yet, we essentially give them permission, but it's no more importantly seen as when you see the headlines now that there is a complete amount of disarray in the propaganda that these people, these actors, these daytime soap opera school teacher actors who come out of obscurity, they are connected to families that have essentially run the world for a very long time. Like in Canada, the name of Trudeau is a name that is connected to governing our country for a lot longer than we're aware of, because we might see the name in the headline as the top figure in the puppet show, but yet that family continues to stay in control even after they're gone. For instance, from my understanding, when Biden moved into so-called power, Obama still sat there behind the scenes working on things to make them happen. And so their name and the publicity that's around them essentially add to the impact of that new puppet that pretends to control the place they're in. And yet when we look into the news media now, we are definitely seeing a large more. No, it's not snowing, it's actually raining. But yeah, it's actually a really thick snow, and yeah. So I just looked at the camera, so thank you for commenting. Um, yeah, so we're now seeing a lot more of these propagandas becoming a lot more clear, and that's evident that we are saying goodbye. We are saying goodbye to their deep state run Amazon and Walmart and Home Depot. We're saying goodbye. We're watching the witnessing the end of companies like Tim Hortons and who else would, yeah, anyways, the restaurants that create cheap food that use cheap ingredients that claim to be better. We're witnessing the end of these corporate companies who essentially have decimated the countries that most of us live in. See, even Canada, for example, we once had Canadian companies, or at least companies that we saw as Canadian. Subway, Booster Juice, um, Future Shop, The Brick. And these companies are essentially bought up by other companies, and then the quality is scrapped. They basically pull down because now they're worrying about making the most money. And then they put out shares in a corporation, and now they're only obligated in order to create positive profits through their shares or shareholder programs, and then therefore they can justify, the business practices they do, such as Tim Hortons right now. They're focused on hiring temporary workers because these people who come in from other countries are willing to do more because that's the culture they were brought up in. They're willing to sacrifice their own personal freedom or even their own energy levels. They're willing to essentially work harder for less than they would and be abused more. And that's what's coming up in the headlines, at least for me, to do with Tim Hortons, is there is a definite focus being put on that. And that's another example of us saying goodbye, that these are the moments before reality shifts and changes for a lot more people. And so that's essentially why I'm out here recording as I am. Thank you for the one person who's on right now, is because we are saying goodbye to them, to their operatives, to their controllers, to their archons, to their royal so-called families, to their pretend fake elites, to their bloodlines that secretly controlled our world through different societies and different organizations, whether it was the Illuminati or the Order of this or the Order of that, or the Skull and Bones, or the Order of the Black Sun, or just all these numerous Freemasons or other societies. We're saying goodbye to that whole structure. And God is assisting those who are connected with the purities of what I feel love is, and that's compassion and support and lifting and love and understanding and unity and forgiveness and all of these things that I feel are at the core of a lot of our music. If you remove all of the negative frequencies and the repetitive, oh, he hurt me, so I'm going to go hurt him back type of crap that's in the music, you can see that there is such a deep, passionate feeling. It's the whole reason why movies have to have those emotional impacts, because although there's a lot of negative programming that's infused within the movies, the ads and the dump trucks that come through on a Transformers movie when they're launching a new sanitation company in America, and that's easily to see in the Transformers movies. They have to add in positive parts where it pulls at our heartstrings and it gets us to connect. And that's why they put in like people screaming when buildings gonna fall in them. Like they have multiple reasons why they put those scenes in there. And yet the love stories and the relationships that are forged within those movies, that's what truly holds us there, for all that other programming of witnessing people getting injured and watching the bad guy do what he does, or learning why the Joker became the evil Joker. They want to connect us with those things that are actually making us of God, of source, of who we truly are, that we are beings of love and compassion. And they rev us up with these war movies and these remembrances of Vietnam and World War II and Battle of Korea and all these other reflections. Even the poppy itself, they've turned into a symbol of war and remembering war and never let the war go. And when it's time to rile up those rivalries between the state and between the different countries, they just focus and on those symbols of remembrance and those animosities that perhaps once had. And yet, most people have maybe grown past a time to be connected to them. And yeah, so we are witnessing the end, and the end has been happening. It has been ongoing since before 2001. Before that airplane did its thing, that was all part of getting us into a state of fear, getting us into a state of vengeance, giving us a show which was more stronger than what we were seeing in the movies, because we were awakening. We were getting to a place where we were reclaiming our being. And even as we moved into the 2007, 2008 economic crash in America, supposedly, that was another example that more people weren't willing to live in this hamster wheel. And the system was slowly losing its control. Then, when we moved into the 2012, we were waking up more than ever. And so everything that's been happening or led up, you can see this as a degradation of their system, of their hamster wheel. We moved into 2019, and that was essentially the end of what they could allow. And so they launched a situation. They actually, in October of 2019, before all that stuff happened, Bill Gates and a lot of other people got together and they played out the whole scenario in this big conference, acting as if what would happen if, and they listed the actual events that ended up happening or very similar to it. What happened in the December in, well, in different places in the world. And they game theoried all of this out, because that was another example that they were losing their ability and their power of control. And we had to go through that experience because once again, they needed to put a state of fear and a state of concern and worry for what was happening. And so, wonderful, beautiful examples that we were winning, that God was winning, and that they were losing control. And see, we used to be controlled by beings, call them archons, call them demons, call them low astral, whatever you'd like them, call them artificial copies of an organic being, maybe, whatever it was. We were controlled by layers so far up removed from our normal society, more akin to the movie Elysium. If you ever watched Elysium, it shows a beautiful paradise where the humans of fortune, they were able to live, and they essentially used the resources of the planet for their own technology and for their own purposes. And that on that planet, or that moon, Elysium, in the movie that has Matt Damon, great movie, go watch it. They had technology, these things called med beds, where they were actually able to heal a lot of conditions that the Homo sapiens that were on Earth struggled with. And I see that as what the reality we lived in. And that I myself was so closed off from true reality, perhaps because of the programming, perhaps because of my upbringing. I don't really know why, but yet all of these insights that I share with you, and even what's happened over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, all of these green screen politicians talking, hands moving through microphones, stories not aligning up, things changing. Suddenly they're saying one thing one day, the next day they're doing something else. They bring out the e-files, they get their fundraising machine going, and then all of a sudden, there's a mute crickets when it comes to any sort of consequences to what actually happened, that it's almost as if none of that stuff really mattered. And yet we see their whole entire system and machine falling apart. We see the ending of their system of control. And we are blessed to be here witnessing it. And for those people who have an opportunity to listen to anything that either a GIA report says, either Carrie Kay says, something that I say, there's a lot other people that are sharing messages as well all over the web. Even the fact that we can publicly talk on platforms like YouTube is a phenomenal sign that we are moving forward. Even the rain, raining as it does, shows us that God is allowing nature to return, allowing Mother Earth to return to their normal cycles. And all of the weather manipulation that was happening, moving weather from one place to another, perhaps is just a little bit of rebalancing. I recognize that in some places rain is absent and that's a challenge and a struggle, but yet that can definitely be seen as an opportunity. Maybe that area of the world needs to be dried out for certain plants to perhaps reemerge. I just had that insight. I recently learned about that Homo sapiens used to have a food source that was naturally abundant on Earth that didn't require us to eat meat or eat other life, even life such as potatoes and carrots. When we're eating the potato and the carrot, that is the plant, that is the life. That's the organic life, and that we're pulling it out of the ground and then calling it a root and eating it, but yet we're eating the plant. And I believe that a lot more things out there have consciousness. So one of the interesting things that came across my brainwaves was that there is a food source that was out there that has been decimated by these people that controlled us, and they forced us to essentially choose the lesser of two evils and corrupt our own mortal coil, perhaps with some form of the quickening, as Kim called it. And therefore, we live in lives that have less abundance or perhaps less longevity. And that because we are choosing to eat something, and once again, I just ate meat last night. I'm not necessarily against it. I understand it, but perhaps that there is reasons why there's certain amounts of water in one place and then arid dry areas in another place, and that soon enough perhaps we will be experiencing lush green grass all over the place. I remember seeing these videos in the Sahara Desert where large grasslands were just popping up. If you ever have the opportunity to look at Earth from a higher perspective, like from a flattened out map, for instance, like on the GIA reports, or at least it once was, you will see there is a rather large scar on Earth which starts, you can call it, from the Egyptian area. And Egyptians used to have a large amount of mystery schools, and origins of humanity and such came from that area, maybe even Ethiopia or something like that. But then that scar upon Earth goes all the way over for where civilization was at one time large and immense and very, enlightened and powerful, and then it goes through the what they call the Middle East, over the tops of areas like Mesopotamia and Constantinople, which and that area in there that once housed large human civilizations, Samaria and other areas, all the way over to where you'd see Tibet and such. And that area is almost as if some, spaceship, we'll call it, some star cruiser, shot a maybe a dew weapon and essentially damaged Earth from orbit along that path, which contained a lot of, humanity's origins, our civilizations that perhaps at one point in time were, you know, a lot more advanced than we believe ourselves to be now. And so if you ever have that chance, take a look at that and then ponder the idea that perhaps, deserts aren't natural. And the location of that area, especially with the Homo sapiens that used to reign within that area, maybe there's reasons why that's there. Nonetheless, I wish to say farewell to the Archons, get the hell off of our planet. And I wish to say goodbye to all deep state systems. Thank you for giving us all the benefits and the lessons and the trials, strengthening us to get us to where we could listen to beings' messages like Jesus and recognize the benefits of what was being said, and through discernment, distract and essentially disconnect from any of all of the other programs that were, nicely woven into their books and such. And I say thank you for all of the opportunities and, the amazing adventure that you took us on, because we are now moving into where, you no longer have the same power, and more people are awakening every second, and your requirement or your covenants and contracts of control, they've expired. Solomon's agreement expired. Your kill chips, maybe even that, somewhat expired. Your for us, due to our permissions, canceled. I no longer consent to anything you do. And what would be best, honestly, is for any and all operatives that are in my life, that they're in your life, or you're actually one of them right now. Go and admit to what you are participating in. Go and, make amends, buy or help or support, or, just reimagine, sit in a room all by yourself and write all the things down that you participated, whatever it is. Make amends, atone for what you've done. You know, that's part of healing, is letting go, is forgiving yourself as well. Forgiveness is a two-way street. It's forgiving others, yes, but it's also forgiving yourself for what you've done. And God, I believe, is a very forgiving being. I believe the Bibles that pit God as this vengeful being, as if God cares whether or not we pay taxes, as if God has a rule about how long your hair should be. That type of God is a fabrication, in my opinion, getting us to believe that God is anything less than love. God doesn't create wars. God has no desire for one group of people to kill another. All of that story about God leading people into war because one God was better than the other God, unfortunately, no, that doesn't fly with me. I feel God is a loving, compassionate, unified being that, unfortunately, we had lessons to learn, and however we view how we got into this state of being stuck where we are, that the master plan is now coming to fruition, and we are stepping out and saying goodbye with giant smiles on our face, gratitudes in our heart, and we're going to essentially birth new areas that have always been there, such as the continent in the Arctic, places that have been perhaps cloaked or beyond our visual perception. They are going to return for those who are wanting to unify. They're wanting to come into communities and live and work together and love together in ways that we have never really seen. Things that don't require jealousy or ownership. Love that blooms like flowers on a seasonal basis, where perhaps, like the rose, which seems to bloom all year long, I've noticed, at least in my reality, or the longevity of moss, how it just continues thriving regardless. We are going to allow love to flourish far more than we'd ever imagined. And no longer will we live in the world where we are forced to choose between the lesser of two evils, because guess what? Evil, deep state, all of those orders and secret societies, your reign is over. And our reign, like you see when we're looking out the window, hello there, Desi. Thank you for joining me. Just like what the rain you're seeing out the window, this rain is God's rain. And it's raining on my window, and it's raining out of the sky, and it's beautiful, and it's bringing in so much amazingness. So thank you so much for sharing your time and attention with me. Thank you to all the people who commented anything. I totally and so much appreciation and love for each and every single one of you. And thank you again to CZY for letting me know that you can hear me, because that definitely improved the quality of, well, my self-expression. So thank you so much love. I definitely see unifications all around the world. There's so many people that are waking up. There's so many non-compliance groups that are getting together where we just simply say no and then go about loving one another and being the beautiful Homo sapiens that God intended us to be, and that we are essentially remembering, not as if we forgot, but we are reconnecting. So RE hyphen membering. We are remembering who we are. We're essentially realigning with our fuller, higher versions of ourselves, meaning more in alignment with God and the primordial directive, and how we are intended to be a part of co-creating this beautiful, beautiful wet planet that we're immersed upon right now. So thank you so much. Look forward to all of the discoveries that I know are right on the verge of me discovering. And as I said, any and all people who have been in my life or in your life, I highly suggest, if you're hearing this, come forth, find atonement, make amends, reconnect. You know, let's get back to a world of truth, a world of harmony, a world of love and connection, and let's make more love. And I say that both in the intimacy as well as, you know, just in the communities that we build. Release those lower vibrational energies. Learn to forgive on all sides. Let's move forward. Let's let go. Those past traumas between countries, you know, those historical wars like the one between China and Japan, between one part of Africa and another part of Africa, the ones between Africa and France, or Africa and Britain, or India and Britain, or whatever it is, all of those long-standing internal conflicts between neighbors, communities, and countrymen. Let's let all that go, because all of that was deep state controlled propaganda to get us to fight with one another. Any animosities between religions, who cares? Let it go. One God isn't better than another God. We are all Homo sapiens, and we all have the same deserving experience on this planet. And if we were to actually start uniting, things will change, and they'll change faster the more we let go. Imagine you're in an air balloon, and on the air balloon, you're holding on to a whole bunch of sacks of all the traumas, all the things that people did to you 10 years ago. I actually had to listen to things that I did 10, 15 years ago from a person, and they're still criticizing me, although I am no longer that person that I've been. But imagine you're on that hot air balloon and you're pumping it with fuel. You're trying to get it to go, but you're holding on to all these weighted traumas, the things that people did to you, the things that you did to yourself, the things that your ancestors did to other people. And you have this all in the hot air balloon. And yet, when you start throwing those out of the balloon, you start letting them go. Don't just absentmindedly throw them all over the side, because you don't know what's underneath. You don't know the outcome. But I mean, with focused intention, looking for areas, therefore, conscious attention put on the whole activity, and letting those trauma. But it's not just the traumas to let go, it's the future expectations. It's the things that we think are going to happen. Or, as I was talking about, how that priest, he expected a certain outcome to happen. We have to let go of those expectations too. Those expectations of what should be. Oh, that person should pay because they did so and so. Oh, I want to go to the town square and I want to watch that person hang because they did blah, blah, blah. Now, I get there's a lot of traumas that people that are far more problematic than the ones I've experienced perhaps in this lifetime, that it's challenging. But yet, through focused intention, we can let that go. And then that hot air balloon, the sky really is the limit. I'm sure there's a limit. of, physics and wise. I doubt that we would just float up into the highest and then just out into the space, but nonetheless, letting it go. And then when you're able to let it go, and the hot air balloon flies even higher, guess what? When you look out into the landscape now, you see a different perspective. You see a higher perspective, closer to God's perspective. Like you're no longer seeing the little bit of land and maybe the fog all around you. Maybe you fly high up enough that you're above the clouds, and now you're be able to see maybe something that's outside of the matrix, kind of very similar to that amazing movie called The Fall Guy, where they're to get to a vantage point that they can actually see the reflection of a video game world that was outside of their video game world. And they were able to do that because they changed their perspective. In this case, releasing trauma, going to a higher floor, like on a skyscraper, for example. Every floor you go higher, every moment the air balloon goes higher, you're able to see further into the horizon. And maybe there'll be something that's far different than you ever imagined. So I leave that thought with you. Consider releasing traumas. Even consider going on to tfttapping.com, which is a organization that I had learned how to do thought field therapy with, and that I had utilized it on myself so I could heal myself. Perhaps doing that might benefit you in some way. And this is a great way to say the last 56 minutes of your life was of listening to me ramble on was benefit all the way to that aha moment. Let's go do TFT. And even if you can't join that group or afford whatever they're charging, you can go onto YouTube and you can find a lot of people who are talking about TFT. And one day in the future, maybe we'll have a seminar or a conference or a workshop and we'll all do TFT all day long. Wouldn't that be awesome to release a lot of traumas and then all of a sudden there's a lot more love making to happen? That would be great for the feminine and the masculine. So thank you so much for sharing your attention with me. I look forward to doing those conferences and workshops on TFT, and I look forward to hearing more about the possibilities that you see. Thank you for letting me know about that, CZY. Yeah, she definitely was a love of my life. But nonetheless, I recognize that she was there for a purpose, and I appreciate all the guardianship that she participated. So thank you again for everyone sharing their attention with me, and I look forward to sharing much more. Have a wonderful day and so much love. And thank you for that heart. Love you so much. Bye-bye.